Hari Om. We start with the prayer. Samasta jana kalyane niratam karunamayam namami chinmayam devam sadgurum brahma vidvaram vasudeva sutam devam kamsa chanura mardhanam devaki paramanandam krishnam vande jagadgurum Tvameva mata cha pita tvameva Tvameva bandhuscha sakha tvameva Tvameva vidya dravidam tvameva Tvameva sarvam amadeva deva Tvameva sarvam gurudeva deva. Hari Om. So we are discussing the preparation of the mind or the purification of the mind, and mind has to be purified, and the purification is decreasing the raga dveshas or the likes and dislikes, because those are the ones that try to take the mind away, and through the sense organs we go and enjoy the sense objects, and therefore the outward the extrovertedness comes because of extensive raga dveshas or vasanas. So only way to reduce the vasanas, or only way to reduce the dissipation of the mind in other pursuits, is to make the mind pure, that is, remove the vasanas. And only way to remove the vasanas is through karma yoga, because just a karma will enhance the vasanas. So to making it as a yoga, Krishna gives the recipe of how to purify the mind. And we just discussed yajñārtham karma anyatra karma bandhanaha. So do for the sake of yajna. So we have discussed various aspects of karma yoga, and with that it has to be pure. So this is a lifelong process of purification of the mind. One cannot get 100% purity because it's thermodynamically even, it's impossible. So one can attain purer and purer state as one reduces the vasanas. How do you know it is reduced? Your desires have reduced, your running after things are reduced, and only it has become a minimum as a basic needs to the degree that it can. It will still be there. You will not have 100% purity, and there is always why, because there is a body is there and a mind is there and the intellect is there, and to sustain the body you have to live in the world. Action will still be required. So even though there are different types of activities that are essentially the nitya naimittika karmas, kamya karmas, and nishiddha karmas and prayaschitta karmas, and in spite of that, still body has been developed with the previous particular, the tendencies are there, and it likes certain type of food and it doesn't like other types of food. So if it is available, if there is a banquet, I go only look for things that I like. Just because I have equanimity, I don't pick up anything that is there. So there is still lingering vasanas, and it will be there for everybody. So only thing we can do is reduction of that through the karma yoga. And how do I know that I have chitta suddhi? When you can listen to the talks, when you listen and attentively or concentrating any object that you are investigating, you have that concentration, and if the concentration is towards that which you have a value, then you have the shraddha, and all other things will come into picture. And therefore, if I have the inclination to listen to the scriptures, because satsangatve nissangatvam, nissangatve nirmohatvam, nirmohatve nischalatatvam, nischalatatve jivan muktaha. By having association with satsang and people of wise people association, my mind gets more and more purified. So wherever there is an opportunity for satsang, I have to make use of that opportunity and gain as much of purity of the mind as a result of satsang. So that becomes a part, and as my mind becomes more and more purer, I tend towards that kind of company, avoiding other companies that are really dissipating my mind. These become naturally and slowly, yourself, the value system will slowly changes as the mind becomes purer and purer and purer. And this mind, a purified mind is required. And therefore, adhikari means one who is qualified to enter into the adhyatmika study or study of the spirituality is the one whose mind is prepared. And there are very few people who have that desire, even though there are thousands of people. Even Krishna's time, Krishna himself says, Manushyanam sahasresu. There are thousands of people, very few people are really interested in the Chandogya Upanishad. Brahmaji is a teacher, and there's an announcement that goes on that Vedanta classes are open, and there are only 2 people registered for that class. One is the king of Asuras, and one is the king of Sura. That is the king of the Rakshasas and the king of the Devatas. So these 2 people are only registered, and one drops out after the first class itself, because he said he understood that only the body is more important, and that's all he has gained, because his vision is only limited, whereas Indra continues until he gains the knowledge. So this example tells us that we need to prepare the mind, and when the mind is prepared, we are ready to listen or approach a teacher. And therefore, the requirement adhikari is been specified, and adhikari means one who is qualified. For any knowledge, there is a qualifications required. And for studying physics, I need to be prepared my mind to study, and there is a qualifications. For any knowledge also, mind requires a certain preparation, and that is what is required even for Vedanta also. Now, for Vedanta, you need a subtle mind that we will discuss a little bit more carefully. But here says the adhikaritvam is defined by Shankara as sadhana chatushtayam. The fourfold qualifications are required for analysis. In the interpretation of the first sutra of the Brahma Sutra, that says Athato Brahma Jignasa, then therefore inquire into inquire into Brahman. That's the first statement. Sutras are very condensed form. So if the very first sutra says then means what? Thereafter, whereafter? That question arises, and this then has been interpreted by different acharyas in a different way. So this Brahman is discussed in the end part of the Vedas, that's called the Uttarakanda. The Purvakanda is where all the rituals and all other aspects, upasanas are described extensively, and therefore that's a big kanda, and only Jnana Kanda where Upanishads are there, and that's where the later part of the Vedanta. So therefore an Acharya defines as then means thereafter means this is the end part of the Vedas. Before you go to that, you have to do the first part of the Vedas. That means you have to do Nitya Naimittika Karma, all those puja vidhis, everything has to be done to prepare the mind. So that is the requirement to enter into this analysis of the Brahman, which is discussed in the Uttarakanda. Uttara means the later part, and therefore former part is the qualifications required for the study of the later part. That is how one Acharya defines. And what is required is actually the purity of the mind. So going through the process of the daily rituals that are obligatory rituals as defined by the Vedas are to be done according to your varnashrama, that prepares the mind for study of the Vedanta. And that's how one Darshanika means one philosopher, teacher defines the requirement. Whereas Shankara says that what you need is sadhana chatushtayam, the fourfold qualification of the mind. How you get that fourfold qualifications depends upon what is required depending upon the mental state. Krishna provides a karma yoga as a means of purification of the mind. Even for Arjuna, he says you have to fight in a surrendering way, then your mind gets purified to enter into Jnana Yoga. But the same Krishna teaches Uddhava later in the Bhagavatam. It's called Uddhava Gita, where Uddhava has been serving Krishna for a long time, and Krishna knows Uddhava has a prepared mind, so immediately he teaches the Jnana Yoga part and asks him to go to Himalayas, go and meditate and do Nididhyasana. So requirement of what Uddhava is different from what the qualifications of Arjuna. Arjuna is still Rajasic, therefore he is fighting in the war. Where Uddhava is a prepared mind, a sattvic mind, therefore ready to learn. And therefore, depending upon the qualification of the student, one can gain the knowledge or purity of the mind is achieved. So, Shankara defines four-fold qualifications required. And the four qualifications are Viveka, Vairagya, Samadhi Shakka Sampatti and Mumukshutvam. These are the four. This is Viveka. We'll go into details. In fact, the Viveka Chudamani gives an exhaustive analysis of each, and we go slowly about the meaning of those. And the Vairagya, dispassion. So Viveka is a discriminative intellect. Vairagya, dispassion. And Samadhi Shatka, the sixth package of discipline involved. So we have the discrimination, dispassion and a discipline, and mumukshutvam and desire for higher knowledge. So we have 4 Ds, the discrimination, dispassion, discipline and desire for liberation, and these are called sadhana chatushtayam, the fourfold qualifications. Now we are going a little bit closely now with the Viveka Chudamani text. My suggestion is those who are following these talks should have the book with them, and even though we do not go detail, but this is important to study later or refer to the slokas as we discuss some of the slokas pertaining to that. And in this, the first one is Viveka. Viveka is a discrimination. So what exactly Viveka has to be understood? So Viveka is, in this context, is Nitya, Anitya, Vastu Viveka. So a discrimination of what is Nityam. Nityam means what is eternal. Anitya, what is ephemeral or what is temporarily, has to be known. Why should I know all that? So we need to know what is Nityam and what is Anityam. So in all this analysis of Vedanta, this comes into picture. So Viveka is a discrimination. One can discriminate anyway, but here is discrimination of very 2 things. One is a subtler and one is grosser a little bit. And this is this Viveka that is required. Whereas in the other study, which we said there are 2 types of studies. One is the Paravidya and Aparavidya. The scripture itself defines these. So for the Aparavidya is all transactional knowledge or knowledge in my transactions. So all objective knowledge that scientists and everything else that we are dealing with deals with Aparavidya. I don't need Paravidya to live in the life. So many people don't need this Vedanta and have no interest in Vedanta because they live comfortably or whatever their life is with Aparavidya. So I can in the Chandogya, the Narada becomes a student and he goes to the Sanat Kumaras as a teacher and says, Sanat Kumara asks, what have you learned? So he gives you a list of close to 60 subjects that he knows. That means he almost like a PhD in so many subjects. But yet, he says, I am still not happy. I need to know what is that knowing which I will know everything. So he needs the Vedantic knowledge, and that's why he approaches. So all other knowledge are essentially or only superficial knowledge. Shankara defines what is the knowledge. It is Brahma Satyam Jagan Mithya Jivo Brahmaivana Paraha. I'm sure you all heard about this. This is in the Brahmavali. The statement is Brahma Satyam Jagan Mithya Jivo Brahmaiva Aparaha. But the second line says Anena Vedyam Tat Shastram Iti Vedanta Dindimaha. Anena Vedyam Tat. What is the three things? Brahma Satyam. Satyam is Brahman is real, and that what is real is not is changing. So real is being defined as Trikala Abhaditam Satyam. So Brahma Satyam means Brahman is Trikala Abhaditam. What does it mean? That which doesn't change any time. Trikala means three times, past, present and future. If it changes, it's not real. So if somebody says something and he changes his statement, that means he is not telling the truth. So we know what is truth. In fact, in the Theosophical Society, if you go, there's a big statement, God is truth and truth is God. So if you ask what is truth, go to when a fellow went to a priest and says, "Sir, God is truth, but what is truth?" So truth is God. So it becomes a circular definition. But what is truth has to be defined, and truth is a fact, and that which reveals the truth is a knowledge, because knowledge is the one that reveals the truth. And this, what is the truth? Brahma Satyam Jagan Mithya Jivo Brahmaivanaparaha is a statement of Shankara. Brahma Satyam, the truth is Brahman. Why truth is Brahman? Brahman is, it is changeless. Trikala Abhaditam, that which does not undergo any modifications in any period time, alone is the truth. So how do you know the Brahman doesn't change? Because Brahman is infinite. Infinite cannot undergo any modification. Therefore, Brahman is defined as nirvikaraha. Vikara means modification. It cannot undergo modification. Therefore, it is changeless. So, changeless is that which is nityam, that means eternal, and that is which is satyam or sat. That is the absolute reality. So, definition of what is absolute reality? That is Brahman is Satyam. Why Brahman is Satyam? Brahman means infinite. Therefore, it remains the same. It cannot undergo modifications. Therefore, it is never changing at any time. And therefore, it is the fundamental law. And then the creation came from Brahman when we said, therefore creation cannot come from Brahman, because creation itself is a modification. There is a vikara. Brahman cannot undergo vikara. But at the same time we are seeing creation. So creation cannot be Brahman, but Brahman being infinite, creation cannot be different from Brahman also, because if it is different from Brahman, then Brahman is no more Brahman. Because something is different from Brahman means Brahman is infinite. If something is different from infinite, infinite ceases to be infinite. It gets limited by the creation. So creation is also part of that, but Brahman cannot have parts, because infinite cannot have any finite parts. Therefore, whatever the creation is not really real, but appears to be real, and therefore it is called Jagan Mithya. So Brahma Satyam, Jagan Mithya. Then who am I? That's how we started the analysis. The subject can also not be defined, and we cannot discriminate one subject from other, because there is only one subject, we said, because I am the only subject from my point, you are the only subject in your point. For you, everything else is objects only for your perception through either pratyaksha pramana or anumana pramana, or by shabda pramana you can establish the existence of anybody else, including the whole world. For you, you don't need any means of knowledge. You are, we said, you are aprameyam. You are not an object for any knowledge, because you are self-existing, self-conscious entity. And if Brahman is also self-existing and self-conscious entity, that's how Vedanta defines, because Prajnanam Brahma, consciousness is Brahman. Therefore, the third statement follows, Brahma Satyam, Jagan Mithya, Jivo Brahmaivanaparaha. Jiva, self, is not different from Brahman, and that is Anena Vedyam Tat Shastram. That is the real science by which I can know these three facts: Brahma Satyam, Jagan Mithya, Jivo Brahmaivanaparaha. And any other knowledge or any other science is not really science. It's an incomplete science because it excludes the subject that is investigating the objective world. It only deals with the objective world, therefore it's a partial knowledge, and partial knowledge or a partial data, and partial data cannot make complete science. Therefore, statement is, by this we can know this only is becomes a science. This in fact Shankara defines in the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad in the Madhukanda as for his introductions. He gives a beautiful introduction to that as his Bhashya, and here he defines what exactly is the knowledge is. So what is Viveka? Viveka is not a discriminative knowledge that differentiates one with respect to other, but a knowledge that sees oneness that pervades everything. And that one pervades everything cannot be seen because it's infinite. At the same time, it is there. Without it, it cannot be. Therefore, Brahman has to be there in everything. At the same time, Brahman cannot be seen because it's infinite. The Sat-existent part itself cannot be seen. That's why ontologically, Vedanta provides an absolute analysis of what exactly existence really means. That itself is Brahman, and that is not metaphysics. People call it a metaphysics because this is a subject which is Vedanta. Vedanta means that which tells you the real knowledge, anena vedyam, that shastram. This is the absolute knowledge that reveals the absolute truth. Absolute truth is the one that cannot undergo any change. And Viveka is required now to enter into Adhyatma. This Viveka differs from the Viveka or the Buddhi or the intelligence required to understand the world. There I need to have a sharp intellect. Here I need a subtle intellect. Sharp intellect is analytical mind, whereas the subtle intellect is a synthetic mind. Analytical mind differentiates one object from the other, because all differentiation and distinguishing and qualifying correctly that separates from this object to other object is exactly what the sciences involved. Whereas this knowledge, at least the absolute science we are talking about, Vedanta, wants to not only discriminate but integration of what we see. So I have to see the one that pervades everything in and through these differences, the one that sees oneness that pervades the plurality, and that knowledge is required. And for that I need a very subtle mind to differentiate when there are two things and two inseparable things, and one is perceived and another is not perceived. The perceived one is not real, unperceived is real, so completely ulta sida. Therefore I need to have very, very subtle intellect to discriminate and to recognize this Brahman which cannot be perceived otherwise. So I had to use a cognitively understand, and we'll go into more detail about it later in the next stop. With this we'll stop here. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vasishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Harihi Om Sri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om. Oh.